It could be the greatest merger of all time or a geopolitical disaster. Shark Tank star and proud Canadian Kevin O'Leary is making a stunning claim that half of his fellow Canucks, that's about 20 million people, are open to President-elect Trump's bold pitch to make Canada the 51st state. And he's even willing to go down to Mar-a-Lago to help broker the deal. Watch.
Canadians over the holidays, the last 2 days, have been talking about this. They want to hear more. Think about the power of combining the two economies, erasing the border between Canada and the United States, and putting all that resource up to the northern borders where China and Russia are knocking on the door. So secure that, give a common currency, figure out taxes across the board, get everything trading both ways, create a new, almost EU-like passport. I like this idea, and at least half of Canadians are interested.
And that's not the only person showing up at Mar-a-Lago. Two top Canadian cabinet members are meeting with Trump's team and border czar Tom Homan today. They aim to hammer out a border security plan that Canada hopes will ward off Trump's threats to impose economically damaging tariffs on imports. Homan is telling Fox that Canada is, quote, ready to go on immigration enforcement, and Trump himself has made it clear where he stands.
Essentially, we're paying Canada, and we love Canada. I have so many friends here. I love Canada. I love it. But why are we spending $150 billion on Canada? Yet Canada allows people and drugs to flood in through our northern border.
So I caught your face as I was talking, and it wasn't just because I called Kevin O'Leary Ken. What do you think about this merger idea, Tyrus?
I think both of his watches are broken. Like, okay, there's no 50% of Canadians willing to give up Canada. I mean, that's their country. That'd be like 50% of Americans being like, oh yeah, we want to join the other side. It almost sounds like a promotional stunt for a TV show. I think the Canadian government is paying attention because President Trump is putting tariffs. He's trolling them. He's having a good time with it, and maybe Mr. Wonderful is trying to get in on it. But 50%, I'd love to see the poll. Like, you know, it goes back to what this administration is trying to do is not a laughing matter. President Trump is putting his foot down, and he's using tariffs to get them to come to the table. I think there's a huge conservative presence in Canada, but we haven't seen it for a long time. And let's be honest, if Canada became a country that will play along with this game, okay, it would be, they're one of the most liberal countries, which means the 2 Senate seats that they would have would make Jessica's day because they would both be liberal and would lose the Senate. So thank you, no, we're good.
Okay.
No deal, as they would say in Guppy Tank or Shark Tank or whatever it is.
Shark Tank, which I was watching last night before I go to bed.
Traitor.
Just kidding. Really? It's so good. So Trump is getting his desired effect, right? People are coming. He's holding court there. He has his transition team down there. But this is pretty high stakes in terms of trade with Canada. So they buy 300 billion of our goods. We buy about 340 billion of their goods. And as last I checked, the USMCA was negotiated by Trump 1.0. So where do you think we end up in all of this, Katie?
Well, we may end up with an additional trade deal that the president believes is better for the American people. But the bottom line is, even if there aren't as many people in Canada who want to give up the country, there are a lot of people that the new administration can work with in Canada, common sense on the economy, to get to the table and at least change some things that he doesn't like that they've seen happening over the past 4 years. I find it very interesting that these ministers who have flown down to Mar-a-Lago after Trudeau flew down there himself to have a one-on-one meeting, are meeting with Tom Homan, who is the new border czar. So Trump is not only using tariffs as a way to push for more border security and to combat fentanyl and to combat terrorism and terrorists who come across the northern border, which is the longest border in the world. And so it's very interesting to see how they're using the economics to push on other issues, not just the trade deficit and maybe a new trade deal that Trump may want for the country.
Yeah, Joey, I want to pick up on that with Tom Homan. He seems to have become really a central player in this transition. And you have Democrats and Republicans that are talking to him. You have Mayor Adams here in New York City that had a meeting with him. Do you think that the Canadians being ready to play ball so quickly, so they have a new border security bill to invest another $1 billion in this, they clearly know that it's a central plank of Trump's platform and what he wants to do moving forward. They're also all up for re-election. Right, and Trudeau is forecasted to lose. Do you think they're foreseeing a Trump-like movement north of the border as well and trying to stamp that out?
I think you've seen it throughout the Western world in some ways, and I don't know if it's Trump-like. I define Trumpism, make America great again, make North America great again now, as populism, as mainstream populism. It's an opportunity for people to feel heard and seen and to feel like you're not speaking for us as some big corporation that puts a movie out with an agenda, one way or the other. You're not speaking for us if your version of DEI puts a disadvantage towards, my kid that's white and male. And so that I don't think is conservatism. I think it's common sense. And I think that that's what you see sweeping across most places that have any form of representative democracy. But when it comes to Canada specifically, when you look at the list of things that we import at high levels, kind of towards the top of the list is oil and gas. You can go all the way back. The Keystone Pipeline, I believe, was Canadian oil and gas. So if President Trump is going to drill, baby, drill in Alaska, and he's going to keep our energy cheap and make us energy independent again, he can't tariff oil and gas and get that accomplished probably, or at least not immediately. So if he does this, and the other one is vehicles, and he's spoken to and a lot about Detroit and the vehicles that are made in this country and in Mexico and in other places. So I would predict that if tariffs were the way, chances are some of these things are carved out anyway. But I mean, the truth is he doesn't want an econ war. He doesn't want a trade war. He wants a secure border. He wants to fulfill his main promise, which is to keep bad things and bad people out of our country as much as possible. And I don't understand how Canada can't be a partner in that. So I don't know why it would have to get to the point of tariffs to begin with.
But that is where he started with all of this.
Yeah.
Right? With the 25%.
Yes, and that was the point, to have an economic impact quickly that is obviously beneficial to Americans. And I agree with Tyrus. I don't think that there are 50% of Canadians who are like, we don't want any national independence at all. We don't want our own identity. We just want to be like the cold, forgotten part of America where people maybe go see Vancouver once every 5 years. I don't think they're dying for that either, but I do have faith that these Canadian conservatives do want a better way of life. Canada has some really manly men, and they are forgotten because they're represented by Justine Trudeau, who wanted to give Americans a lecture that, we failed because we didn't elect Kamala and we didn't elect Hillary. Well, that's because American voters rationally looked at these two candidates and said, maybe they don't represent my personal interests. And they look at Donald Trump and they go, I like some of the things he has to say. I'm going to give him a shot once again. But the difference is there are a lot of Americans who want their politicians to work with Donald Trump, not just work against him. And I think that might be how a lot of Canadians feel. But they also want the agreement to benefit their lives economically and in every other way possible. If that means that it's easier to travel between the United States and Canada, that's fantastic. I do think this president wants a secure border. I think that he's trolling. He doesn't want a 51st state, because if you want a secure border, the first thing you do is not dissolve it. So I think people are taking some of his jokes too literally.
Right. How did we say it in the first term? Like, never take him literally.
Seriously, but not literally.
Seriously, but not literally.
Yes.
The 47th president of the United States of America.
I also would fit in that description.
I mean, all of us on a holiday Friday.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.